So, Ed, welcome to CTO Confessions. It's great to have you on board, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Brilliant, brilliant. So tell the audience who are listening to this podcast, who are you, what do you do, and who do you work for?
All right. Well, my name is Ed Frederici, and I am the CTO of a company called Appfire. Appfire is a company that you've probably used our products if you do any type of work in the Atlassian, Salesforce, or Microsoft space. Our mission is to equip and connect teams so that they can deliver their best work. And what that means is we build applications that go into ecosystems like Atlassian's Gill or Confluence, Microsoft, Salesforce, Monday.com, and we extend the functionality and we connect those systems together along with other systems, maybe like Zendesk, so that teams can collaborate but choose their own tools, and that any piece of functionality that you wish you had is actually there because we've created it for you. Brilliant. So we have about 170 applications that fill in those ecosystems, and we really enable knowledge workers to be as productive and collaborative as possible while having autonomy in what tool set they use.
Fantastic. Sounds good. It's interesting to hear about tech. I mean, I see it all the time, but a lot of people don't appreciate the tech underneath the tech. You know, you're using an application and there's lots of stuff and detail going on under the surface.
Well, our applications can be very simple. I'll give you one of my favorites. It's called numbered headings. In Atlassian's Confluence, there is not numbered heading functionality. So we have an application that does nothing except for supply numbered headings. But we have really complex applications like portfolio management, workflow management, those type of things that are robust applications that have 45 developers that work on them.
Wow.
So it's interesting that the needs to fill in the different spaces inside those ecosystems can be very small, but yet incredibly impactful or gargantuan. And we try to fit the entire spectrum so that we help those knowledge workers be successful.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of the theory of constraints. You know, when you've got like a flow of work, the flow of work is only going to be as fast as the slowest part of that system.
Yeah, totally true. It's like the link is weak in the chain, right?
Yes, so that's exactly it.
Even if it's trivial, if it's blocking you from doing what you need to do, it's as important as something that might be very, critical or big.
Yes. And what's the core of the technology that you use in this space?
That's a great question. So we grew through acquisition. So we don't really have a technology core. We've done 25 acquisitions to date.
Wow.
So when you acquire a company, it comes with whatever tech stack it comes with. So it could be Java, it could be PHP, it could be React or Angular or something else. And we don't find any value in rewriting an application in a common tech stack that doesn't offer value to our clients. It's time consuming, it's costly. So we have a real distributed tech stack that we don't try to centralize on any one thing.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So give us so one of the things that I assume that you've got in that space, because it's the thing that everyone's talking about, AI. I guess that's quite a big part of what you do there with your apps.
Yes. So we have a huge focus on AI, just like everybody else does. One of the things that we believe to be true is we don't want to be we have AI2 company. We want to give an AI solution that adds serious incremental value to our client base. And we also use AI internally. So just a quick example, Atlassian has an AI model that's inherent in the Atlassian products called Rovo. We created a Rovo agent and created an application called Workflow Pro, and it uses AI to tell a client what their workflow should look like and how they should create it to get optimal performance out of that workflow. It's a great use case. Workflows, they seem so easy, but if you miss a step or it's constructed incorrectly, it becomes a burden versus an assistant. And so using that AI intelligence and access to all the data of all workflows ever done really gives you a leg up on creating an impactful, meaningful workflow.
Wow.
We also use AI in our customer support. It's a great tool there. So we built AI agents that took all of our support history across time, all of our knowledge base, all that type of knowledge, loaded it into an LLM and created a support agent for each individual application. And the way we use that is it'll answer the question. That question or that answer goes in front of an actual live human being. They review it for accuracy, complexity, appropriateness, all those type of things. And then they pass it on to the client.
Wow.
We have seen anywhere from 9% deflection rate to 92% deflection rate, where we have the AI agent answering completely the entire question from the customer with minimal human involvement.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. I mean, those numbers are quite huge because I have to confess, I have used some AI bots before, and they have been quite frustrating. So it sounds like you're using real case examples to create real answers for people rather than just something rule based.
Yeah. So we took the approach that we want to treat AI as if it's a human employee. And that means a whole bunch of different things. So if you think about onboarding a customer support rep, they go through extensive training. They learn how to use the applications. They learn the knowledge base. They see other support examples. We taught all of that to the AI. We also applied the same level of security compliance, oversight, et cetera, that you would have an employee learn. We apply that to the AI agents as well. And that way we treat them in a way that's valuable to our clients, and they produce an outcome that's valuable to our clients. So
Wow.
we really have been very intentional making sure that those AI agents that we use are not annoying little things that you shut off because they answer the wrong question or they're not very intelligent. We want them to be value adds on your day-to-day life.
Yeah, but that's great. So one of the things I've noticed about using AI, and I'm not using it to the extent that your teams and your customers are using it, I'm always really surprised at the outcomes of what AI brings. What's the big surprises that you've seen that have emerged from the use of that technology?
I'd say the biggest honest surprise has been the incredible quality of the answer that you can get when you train the model correctly. So a lot of our applications require coding. They have the CLI or something to them. And a frequent question we get through support would be, how do I write this piece of code? And when you use the AI agent that's been appropriately trained, it doesn't just give you really well-formatted, incredibly powerful code. It explains to you what it's doing, how it works, why you build it that way. And it's really an education to the person asking the question. And so the ability to drive an outcome that's enriching to the question asked has been the thing that's really amazed me the most.
Yeah. In fact, being a coder in the past myself, I mean, I used to be a very verbose commenter because I never knew when I was going to come back to code and had to understand what the hell I was doing. So that's really interesting that you're using it to actually explain what's happening as well. So in a way, it's kind of developing the coders as well as doing some of the work for them, augmenting them, so to speak.
Yeah. So our developers use AI as well. So we use Copilot, Cursor, and other tool sets to not just suggest code that you might write to do with logging or something simple, but it can also help you get up to speed on a new piece of code that you've never seen before by telling you what it's doing and how it's working, right? So if you think about it, if you were assigned a ticket and it's in a piece of the code base you've never worked on, you have a learning curve to go figure out how that's work, how it's structured, what it's do. You can use AI to give you a very quick tutorial on that. You can show it the code. It'll tell you what the code does, how it works, where flaws might exist.
Wow.
And you get up to speed that much faster. So it does drive meaningful increased productivity for the day-to-day developer and lets them get past some of those mundane tasks and get to the more strategic, more interesting things that you do.
Right. Excellent. That's good. So Ed, obviously you've mentioned that the tool does some level of automation for your various platforms and tools and ecosystems that you work on. So the question I have, being a very human-centric person, is how do you keep that personalized? How do you do the automation and make sure that somebody feels as though they are being looked after like they would be with somebody on a call with them or chatting to them online?
Right. And so disintermediating that human factor is a risk of AI, right? And I think we've been through it in different forms as call trees and those things were created and you couldn't talk to a human being and be very frustrated, right? So we want to give you the opportunity to have that AI interaction and we want it to be exceptional and somewhat human, but we don't take away your ability to talk to a human being as well, right?
Right.
So I used the term deflection earlier. A deflection just means that your question was answered successfully and you do not go to the next level of support or the next level of whatever, right? And so we don't take away the human interaction. We augment it with AI and give you the opportunity to kind of choose. The way I think about it is as texting became the way people communicated, you switch from a live phone call to a text. Some people preferred live phone calls. Some people prefer text. You have a communication preference. Well, I think you have a problem-solving preference now that's coming into play as AI becomes more common and prolific across code bases. And so we try to balance the two and leave the decision in the hand of the user.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I can imagine Actually, that's a really good comparison between text and calling, because I know there's certain communication protocols, if you want to use that kind of big word around it, for certain types of conversations. Sometimes I don't want to have all the small talk. I just want to say what I want to say. And I guess that, and the term deflection, I imagine that creates huge savings for people using this tool.
It does. So it does a couple of things for us. It creates that savings because I don't need as many human beings in software. Cost is really people, right? But it also gives us an opportunity to provide a better experience to the client faster. So one of the side effects of putting those AI agents in place and support is reduced our response times and increased the one-time solution to a ticket. So it's helped in not just the fact that it can take on more work, it helps us do that work better, get the client issue resolved faster. And that's true in the way we use it in coding. We use AI for our tech writing team, and that initial draft or some of the structure of a document that a tech writer is creating is done through AI, and then it's polished by a human being. So you can see it pretty much. We use it in legal, right? Every aspect of the business is seeing value out of AI. And the thing that's important is that you put governance around it to make sure that it's being used in a responsible way that drives business strategy, protects your clients. But any department in our organization today has access to AI and uses it in some meaningful way.
Wow. And I guess as part of all this is that it takes the mundane out of some of the work as well, because some of it's very repetitive for the customer as well, for the kind of end user. I can see how that, I guess it allows that when the human element, the human layer is brought into the picture, it's more of a, less kind of process, more kind of looking after people.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of touched on it when you mentioned text and wanting to be able to just get past the small talk to the action, right? If you're just trying to solve a very specific problem, an AI agent might be wonderful because you can say, how do I do this? And it just shows you how to do that. And it's on your time, at your pace, through whatever medium you like. But then you can dive deeper and go to a human being as well. And it takes the low level, kind of less value add activities and expedites those and gives the human interaction the time to have the higher level, more enriching interactions.
Yeah. And I imagine the transition from somebody using the automation aspect of it over to the human being, is there some type of transition that's kind of supported by the tool as well, so that they're not asking the same old questions again?
Yes. So one, we generally give you the option to opt into whether or not you want to even interact with an AI-driven agent. And we're very intentional about letting you know it's not a human being. So that way you're consciously choosing whether or not you want that solution. And then we train it on the knowledge base, all the support tickets we've had before, but then every question asked is another training. And so it gets smarter as time goes by, and it should be able to then give the end user the best answer possible. So if you go back to Workflow Pro, which is one of the products that we delivered with AI, it learns every time someone creates a new workflow, and it has the ability to offer a better solution to the next person that asks it a question.
Wow. Yeah. I'd love to see this in action, because I think sometimes when you're redesigning a workflow or a process, sometimes it can be quite laborious, and not everybody that's kind of involved has seen all the different use cases, the different kind of examples.
Yeah. So I was a teaching assistant in college, and it was one of the best ways to learn something because you saw not your perspective, but the perspective of every student that you taught. And so it gave you a greater breadth of questions and thought process that you could lean on. When you use AI across the entire client base, you are giving the individual the knowledge of the entire client base and all that experience. So it immediately enhances your own ability by giving you access to everything that's gone on before.
Yeah. So my mind's gone back to the kind of companies that use this. What kind of systems and platforms are using your tool?
Everyone you could possibly imagine. So financial services, SaaS software companies, manufacturing companies, anyone who employs a knowledge worker is a potential client for us. And it doesn't really matter on industry. Everybody has a workflow or a ticketing system or a support system, or might use a CRM system that is missing a piece of connectivity or missing a piece of functionality. We fill in those gaps, and then they get value from that. So we have We have tens of thousands of clients across every industry you can possibly imagine.
Wow. That's pretty impressive stuff. Again, I'm always amazed by the tech that sits behind the tech. You're providing a solution that's kind of multiplying efficiencies across different areas. And you mentioned there around different platforms, different companies, they've all got their unique ways of doing stuff. So how do you spot missing functionality and then prioritize that? Because I imagine there's a whole backlog of things that could be improved, the missing gaps, I think you called them, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So those interstitial spaces and functionality where there's a gap, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you learn it. One is creating relationships inside of an ecosystem so that you begin to see how people consume that ecosystem, where they're having trouble, where there is that gap. Another is to do typical product management, market surveys to really understand the market space and what's going on there.
Right.
And once you're into one ecosystem deeply, a lot of the problems that exist there exist elsewhere as well. So you can see that we have applications in our portfolio that aren't in one ecosystem or two ecosystems or three ecosystems. They're in many. Wow. So we have a tool called a 7-Pace Time Tracker, and it's a time recording tool for anyone who wants to have one, any knowledge worker. Well, it's in the Microsoft ecosystem, it's in the Atlassian ecosystem, it's in the Monday ecosystem. It transcends an ecosystem-specific task because it's a common task across all disciplines. And that's one of the things we look for when we do evaluation of where a gap is. Does that gap exist in more than one place?
Right. Excellent. And so, yeah, how do you prioritize that? Is that where you're looking for the things that are kind of not platform or ecosystem specific? They're more kind of general. This would be good for everybody type thing.
We do. So it's a multi-factor evaluation. One is obviously we're a business. We need to know what the TAM and the SAM are and whether or not it's something people want to consume and what the price point you can get for it is. So we need to know whether it's a easily replaceable solution, right? Is that ecosystem going to introduce a piece of functionality that would make our application invalid any longer?
Right.
Then we look at whether or not it's applicable across ecosystem. We look at time to market, all those type of things. And then we decide to, we prioritize based on that. So we have a lot of time dedicated to understanding what's happening in an ecosystem, where the deficiencies are, how long those deficiencies might last, and then how we can help fill them in. And it's one of the reasons we grew through acquisition is you will find people who have solved unique problems really effectively. And there's no reason to go to create a tool that compete with them, have them join the company, and then you expand that way.
Yeah, I had that lined up as a question later on, but I'm going to touch on it now. So when you've obviously got these gaps, you're seeing functionalities missing, and there's a lot of stuff going on out there. I always refer to it as the innovation storm, and there's lots of people, it's always a democratized innovation as well. People are just having a go. Platforms are being created that are creating more innovation. How do you spot that stuff? And how then do you decide that's a company that we're going to bring into our family?
So we spend a lot of time in the ecosystem just getting to know people. So when you go to a conference, it's not just an opportunity to sell your products. There's an opportunity to meet everyone else that builds every other project in that ecosystem, right? And so if you look, our founder, Randall Ward, he's been in the Atlassian ecosystem for 20 years now. He knows everybody. And so it gives him that opportunity to really learn what people are doing, where trends are, where they're going. We have groups of competitors really that we meet with, and we discuss about what we're seeing happening, where the needs are. And it's kind of a co-opetition type of space where you want to know everybody because you can learn from them, and then you work together to solve the problem, even though you're also competing at sometimes for the same business.
Right. That's great to hear, because I always think that companies can be quite adversarial, or I've seen examples of that. And it's really wonderful to hear you come together to have those conversations, because I guess it invigorates the space, and also there's ideas that emerge from just conversations that you didn't expect.
Exactly. So we meet once a month with the other top vendors in the ecosystems. And it's a little cagey. Sometimes you don't want to share the most critical thing you're working on.
Yeah.
But they all have expertise. We all see trends. We see different things. We'll talk about those. And like when emergent technologies appear on the horizon, we talk about those and how they can be used. And then occasionally we'll pass like leads on, like, hey, we don't do this, but we know you do. here's an opportunity we see. And people do that back to us as well. And so, we're a people-driven culture, and our focus internally is all about the person as the top of the hierarchy, right? Because if you have really engaged, very happy employees, you tend to have a really successful company. And we apply that outside of Appfire as well. And we do that with our competitors. We do that within the ecosystems. And then we have social responsibility functions where we do that globally just to try to be good human beings.
Yeah, it's really wonderful to hear. And I guess the outcomes of that are, doing good business with people, good relationships, and heads up as to what's happening. Remind me how many acquisitions you had, because I heard a number before and it was quite impressive.
Yeah, we just did our 25th acquisition a couple of weeks ago.
Wow, that's a lot. And integrating into those companies, when you do the acquisitions, there's a lot of work that goes on. I see you smiling there because you kind of, there's an experience around that. I mean, how do you go about that? Is that quite tough? Is there a process that you have around that to bring them into the fold and create alignment?
Yeah, I think we've all seen a company acquire another company, and then the thing that was special about the acquired company disappeared because the integration into the acquiring company wasn't very strong, right? So we're very intentional about that. We want people to have an identity that they're part of Appfire. So when we acquire a company, we have a playbook that we go through where we very intentionally bring them on board. And so our number one thing is do no harm. We don't want to change their culture. We don't want to disrupt their momentum. We don't want to change their roadmap. When we do the diligence to acquire a company, we obviously care about financial metrics. We care about quality of tech. We care equally about the culture and the people that we're acquiring. So we've walked away from businesses that were really financially strong because the folks in them did not meet our standard for cultural unity with us. So we go through what we call the one Appfire process. So when someone comes on board, we work to bring them into the fold. We don't ask them to rewrite their tech stack. We don't ask them necessarily to immediately change everything they do. We do take on, we're a larger company than most of the companies we acquire. So we have specialization they don't. We have a DevOps team. We have a centralized center of excellence for QA. We have finance, marketing. So we take those functions and we move people into those functions, and then we bring them into our fold. What I like to think of it as is goal-based autonomy. So you come in, we have a set of goals. You can achieve those goals however you want. We give you guardrails. We want you to have this type of process. We want you to track these types of metrics. We want you to conform to this standard. But beyond that, we let those teams be who they are. And then we provide a lot of lateral movement. So you can move from an acquired team into an existing team and vice versa, so that we get this cross-pollination. We call our employees fireflies. So we're Appfire.
Nice.
Like everything here has fire in the name. We call our employees fireflies. So we want that company coming in to become true fireflies. And one way to do that is to allow them to move wherever they want inside the company.
Wow. And this was a topic that we were talking about offline before we started the recording. I love this idea of autonomy of people, because we spoke about agile and kind of the real true essence of agile is to create autonomous people, allow people to be creative in the way they want to be. And one of the things you mentioned there is measure, to measure the metrics, certain metrics that they've got to. I see the importance of metrics. I think it's really important because it gives you kind of like a dashboard as to, is the needle going in the right direction? Are they delivering as we kind of expected? And that allows them to kind of get on with it without you having to breathe down their neck. Do you find your measures, what's the art of measurement for you that's going to work really well?
So it's a great question. It's a really hard question to answer because I think it's unique based on circumstance and company, right? So I could measure how many story points you finish inside of a sprint, how many Git commits you do, and that's showing me activity, but it's not showing me outcome. So we want to see the impact of someone's work to the business. So we've tried to use value stream management tools to take all of that information, apply some AI to it actually, and then upload all of that to a piece of, take data, turn it into information, right? So we can look at your Git commits, we can look at your calendar, we can look at how much time you spend on Slack, but take all of that and say, okay, well, this is the outcome you're producing. And so we focus a lot, not on the individual, but on the team and what that team is able to accomplish. So when we measure, We measure your ability to achieve an outcome and have an impact on the business, have an impact for clients versus discrete units of work. I don't care how many story points you do. I care more about whether or not we shipped a meaningful feature that had some positive impact on CSAT, on revenue, or some larger, more overarching metric.
Yeah. And how do you make sure that developers are, again, remembering how I was an engineer, I always found it really frustrating. I didn't know really where my code was going or how it was really being used. I didn't even, I used to work in telecom. So, I always wanted to visit the exchange so I could see where the equipment was and how it was being placed and how what impact it was having on the system as a whole. How do you make sure that the developers are connected to what the customer actually want, those outcomes?
So that's a great question. So one way is we use our own tools. So in our planning process, when we're doing high-level OKRs, we have a tool called OKRs for Jira. We use OKR for Jira to document and disseminate our goals for the year. Wow. And so we use Time Tracker internally to measure time. We use TFS for Jira to do Git commit and stuff like that. So we use a bunch of our tools internally. So as a developer, or as a knowledge worker at Appfire, you on a daily basis consume your own dog food, drink your own champagne, however you want to look at that. So you understand the use case.
Yeah.
And since a lot of almost all of our really client base is knowledge workers, and we're pretty focused heavily in the tech sector, our engineers natively understand how our clients consume our products because they do that job every day.
Yes.
But we spend a lot of time. I think it's really important for people to understand how every piece of work they do contributes to corporate strategy.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time tying the lowest level activity to the highest level goal so people understand their value to the organization, why they're being asked to do something, and are contextualize effort to outcome.
Yeah. I wish I'd have worked in more companies that had that, because I've always found it, sometimes you don't feel purposeful. I don't know if that kind of makes sense to you. You feel like you're just doing something. You're just a cog in the machine turning the handle or being turned, so to speak. And when you have that understanding of the bigger picture and the outcome, you can connect to it. And you can also start thinking quite creatively around it because, it's another level of thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So two things come to mind when you say that. One is, we grew through acquisition. We did the 25 acquisitions. We acquired employees who were entrepreneurial, who understood the market, who solved a problem. And that spirit came with them into Appfire. And one of the things that we're very intentional about is not accidentally crushing that spirit. So we want that entrepreneurial mindset. We want that innovative mindset to live forever amongst our employee base. And that really does create a sense within the company that you have purpose, that you have meaning, that you're trying to get something done.
Yeah.
When you marry that with the goal-based autonomy and you give people maximum freedom, it really invigorates their entrepreneurial spirit and allows them to innovate and do things and bring ideas to you that you might not have had. Yeah. I think as a seasoned manager, one of the mistakes I see young managers make is that everything goes through them. And then your capacity, your team's capacity becomes limited by your own personal capacity, right? If you delegate and give freedom to people, then you maximize the capacity of your team to its highest potential. And that can be difficult because you're not always aware of what's going on. You're not in control of everything. You are trusting people to make the best decision in the right moment. But that liberates you to achieve the most that you can.
Yeah. And I guess for the leader as well, they can start thinking on a meta level, start being more creative on another scale, seeing the bigger picture, seeing the direction. And then
that's completely true. I just talked to our chief product officer about this the other day. We meet every day pretty much. And we were talking about, we've just gone through our own merit and promotional cycle and done calibration with our employees. And so we've been talking about this. And one of the things that we think is true is that on a day-to-day basis, I should not be needed in the company because the company can run itself. My team can run itself. They're completely autonomous. My value is strategy, support, outcome. I'm a 6-month tool, not a day-to-day tool. And that's true at different levels across the entire organization, all the way to your frontline manager, right? Your team should run without you very effectively. You're there to trailblaze and lead the way some distance ahead of where your team's at today.
Yeah. I think the point you made there, Ed, around you're a 6-month leader, you're a 6-month tool. I think that's a great image that I have in my head, because I think leaders, they tend to navigate a very wide set of time spans, so they've got, from hour to hour to day to week to week, and to kind of disengage from that and see and spend more time in these kind of larger scales is really important. That's one of my takeaways actually from our conversation today. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that if you're too in the moment, you lose your ability to be strategic, and your decisions become driven by the fire hose of what's happening today versus the outcomes you want to drive as a company long term.
Yes.
And so that objectivity you get by being able to take a step back is really important to being a successful leader.
Yeah. And one of the things, I work with a lot of leaders, and one of the things I always find interesting as organizations get bigger and get more complex is awareness of what's going on. Everything comes from awareness. If you don't know, you can't act upon it. And there's some things you don't need to know, and there's some things how do you find that balance? How do you find the balance between the information flow and people to act on that?
Yeah. Communication is really key, and it gets really hard. So I have about 600 people in my organization.
Wow.
Keeping all 600 people up to date on why we're making decisions, what our priorities are, can be challenging.
Yes.
So we use a variety of techniques to do it. So we have the executive team, right? That's the top of the hierarchy in some ways. But what we say is that the SLT runs the business. So the people who are a couple clicks down are the people actually effectively running the business. And so we try to make sure that we provide goals and strategy and mindset to them. They click down and do a lot of the operational details. And then we ask them to always take that same behavior to their management team, to their management team, to their management team. So you get down to the individual contributor. And that flow of information is really effective in letting people know what's going on, what we're doing, why we maybe change direction. And then we do simple things. We have so I run engineering, InfoSec, and support in DevOps. We have a monthly all hands with everybody in that group, and we talk about what's going on in the organization, what's happening. We have individual team meetings. We do the same thing. We have Scrum meetings, all those type of things. So we try to go from the highest level, like the biggest size of the group, down to the individual, and convey the same message through different mediums so that people hear it multiple times and are really aware of what's happening inside the business.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I guess, yeah, I always fascinated as the numbers and the scale gets bigger, how you manage that, because it can turn into a bit of a head mess, because, you can get overwhelmed, you can get flooded, and also a mix of information can sometimes kind of have unintended effects, Yeah, so it's interesting that you are trying to solve this, and I'd love to have more conversations about that. But I've got a few more questions around your tool, actually. So we kind of mentioned, AI is kind of like a golden thread running through pretty much everything you're doing. In fact, coming back to the fire, Appfire, you sound like a furnace of AI going on there.
And so I think the question you're really asking is how do we put that golden thread through everything effectively, right? And so what we've done is, you think about, we did 25 acquisitions. That doesn't mean we acquired 25 applications. We have 170-ish paid applications. We have 209 total applications. That's a lot of surface area to cover. So one of the things that you experience is, if I want to introduce AI to all those applications, I have to do it in a way that's effective. I can't have every individual Scrum team build the exact same AI tool set. So we platformatized shared services, and we've platformatized AI so that you're working in a central location, and we're giving more robust tools to the individual teams to go accomplish what they want. And so we've really taken a mindset where we have an AI, a set of AI teams. We have 4 Scrum teams that work on AI on a daily basis. And they work with each individual application and work with the marketing team, with the product management team, to understand what potential needs out in the marketplaces are.
Right.
And then they will build a piece of functioning that solves that need. And then the teams consume it. And that way, it's kind of a one-to-many force multiplier. Once we have a piece, let's say sentiment analysis, right? That's a really simple AI tool. But if we have a high-quality value-add sentiment analysis to text, we can then use that in every single application rapidly. So as we develop meaningful AI solutions, every team has a chance to onboard them and solution with them really fast. And so we have this governance to make sure it's high quality and meaningful and differentiated. But once that decision is made and we build that, it becomes immediately available to every team at Appfire.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. I love that. You're not reinventing the wheel or kind of creating different copies of the same functionality. This is the app that you use. This is do you call it app? Do you call them apps?
And we just call them services, generally speaking, or agents. And one thing that's interesting is obviously AI is going through just massive iterations. So today's perfect model is tomorrow's has-been model, right? So one of the things we have to do when we build AI is abstract the implementation from the outcome so that as better, newer tool set comes available, we can change out that bottom layer and have that change out be invisible to the apps that consume it. Right. So we've been very intentional about the architecture so that we don't have to retool above a very base level when we find something new that's better.
Right, so you can kind of insert it. There's layers of abstraction where you can kind of insert
exactly.
Yeah, and the kind of techie in me is kind of wanting to ask this question because I think quality of outcomes, quality of what the software's creating and the platforms are creating is really important. So AI being something that's not very deterministic, it has nuances in it. How do you test that? How do you make sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Right. So we this is a great question, right? And so one is rigorous test cases inside, well-documented success criteria as you build something. But then we go through an EAP, a beta. We deliver it to the client base in a controlled, measured fashion so that we can really understand the impact to the end user. So we use a lot of data. We instrument our applications so that we can see user behavior. We do UX research. We spend a lot of time getting it right. So one of the early discussions I had at Appfire when I joined is I sat down with all of our managers and I asked the question, are we a team that ships software based on a date or are we a team that ships software based on functionality? And we're a team that ships software based on functionality. We obviously care about dates. We're a business. You have to deliver things to the market. But we don't ever deliver a piece of software that is not highly differentiated, of high quality, and has been proven to have value. So we will be slower up front so that when we come out the back, it's something that people really want to use. And your time to market, your time to dollar might be slower, but the impact to the client base, the impact to the company is greater in the long run.
Absolutely. It's nothing like delivering something that creates a mess out in the field. Right. And then you've got to mop up that mess. And also it has a lasting effect. People don't forget, when something didn't quite go as expected. So I think that's really good to hear. And your take on, because in the world that we live in, it seems to be all about speed and delivering on time and apps, and though that is important, I think it's interesting to hear the kind of quality side of it as well.
Yeah. First mover advantage is real, but it's also overemphasized. The person that, generally speaking, the person that delivers the best product wins. And if you are second to market, but your product is highly differentiated and far better than the first to market product, you're ultimately going to win.
Yeah.
And so we in the kind of do no harm, be very people-centric that runs throughout our entire business, we don't want to deliver a feature because it's a great marketing tool. We want to deliver a feature because it adds value. And that is a little bit antithetical to how most software is developed in some places. But we want to be genuine. We want to be real. We want to make sure that whatever we deliver to you is something you want to use. Because if you take it back to being a business, you deliver a really successful tool that adds value. You don't have churn. You cross-sell better. It does good things for your company long-term.
Yeah. And I guess it doesn't create those fires, coming back to the fire analogy. You're not having fire drills. It reduces the noise in the business as well.
It does. So going back to the comment you made, you gain trust in drips, you lose it in buckets.
Yeah.
So if you ship something bad, you lose a lot of trust amongst the client base.
100%.
Right? And it takes forever to gain it back. And sometimes you don't ever get it back. Yeah. So we're very careful to be fast-paced and fast-moving, but with intentionality and with an eye towards quality and impact, so that we always are incrementally increasing trust with the client base and not losing it.
Yeah. It reminds me of the early days of smartphones. I don't know if you remember the early Windows-based phones that we used to have. This is before Apple kind of came into into the mix. And I used to use a particular company called HTC, and they're great phones, great functionality. There was all kinds of different models, but I just wanted to throw it out the window because it didn't actually do what it was supposed to do. It was so frustrating. It had all the potential, but again, I think that was an example of quick to market and drive people around the bend, and then when Apple came along, you just knew that there was this kind of groundedness around its usability and what have you, even though it didn't have all the bells and whistles.
Sure. So if you go back to the agile mindset, we have an MVP, right? We have a minimum set of viable functionality that we'll ship. We want to make sure it's great, but we ship that as soon as possible so we can iterate on it. There's nothing better than seeing software live out with a client base and how it actually gets used.
Yes.
And so we balance speed with quality, but we try to ship something that is small enough to be quick, but big enough to be usable. And then you iterate on it over time, and then you end up building a better total product.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with you. And actually, this kind of brings me on to a question. We'll put the spotlight on you, Ed, about your leadership. How do you roll as a leader? What's your style?
So I like to be a consultative leader. I like to give people, and we said it a lot, autonomy. I give people as much autonomy as they can handle, right? I'm a firm believer that the more you allow others to do, the better organization that you are. And if you can supply the strategy behind the decision-making, the goals you're trying to achieve, give people the big picture, then they can contribute to that big picture really effectively. And you maximize how much you can get done and the impact the organization can have. So I don't make decisions for my team. My team makes decisions. I'm a firm believer that if you want to have great leaders, don't have an opinion, right? You supply the context, but you don't tell them what they're going to do. That's not what a good leader does. So I really like to give people the opportunity to be their best. And that means taking risks, failing sometimes, but you learn from those and you become a better leader, and everyone down the management chain, down to all the way to the IC, has the opportunity to contribute their maximum value to the company.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's easy as leaders. We feel like we need to make decisions for people. And I think that's a really good take as a leadership tool is to hand it to people, because they've got to exercise the art of making decisions as well. If you're taking it away from them, at some point they're going to end up in a situation where they've got to make a decision. They've got to, I haven't done any of that practicing of that art, as well. And so from my own experience, what I've noticed is that sometimes when you do make a decision, it's not always the right decision, because, we're all human and we make mistakes and we might not have all the information, or we just gave something a shot. But how do you deal with that in a space where there is some level of not getting it right?
Right. So one of the things is when you have accountability, it has to be like intelligent accountability. So if you've given someone the autonomy to go do their own thing and they make a mistake, you can't penalize them for making that mistake as long as it was made with genuine intent, right? So in my basic rubric, I never penalize someone unless their mistake was made with apathy or incompetence, right? And incompetence doesn't mean that they're not learning. People make mistakes because they didn't know something. That's fine, right? So you have to give people the safe space, if you will, to go out and take risks. And those risks succeed sometimes and they fail sometimes, and it's okay to fail. Right. So vulnerability, let's talk about that as a leadership technique. Vulnerability is completely okay. You are fine to say, I don't know, I'm uncertain, whatever it might be. Because if you don't have vulnerability, you have this artificial facade where you are overly confident and you're not really seeking the input of others or collaborating cross-functionally to find out what the best answer to something is. So having vulnerability, I think, is a key piece to having autonomy that works.
Yeah, because exactly. People put on an act, and some of the really stupid things can happen when people are putting on an act, and that's really good to hear. Actually, I think that's a breath of fresh air, and hopefully a lot of our audience listen to this. Aspiring leaders and existing ones. The importance of having that small. That quality in the space, I think it makes a huge difference. It amplifies all kinds of other behaviors and creates some nice emergent results from it. So Ed, as we come towards the closing arc of our time together, unfortunately, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've got so many takeaways from this. It's quite wonderful. It sounds like a beautiful company to work for. What advice would you give to aspiring leaders out there? Because obviously I've looked at your LinkedIn, you've had an interesting journey to where you are now. What advice would you give to maybe help people in their journey towards tech leadership?
I think I give two pieces of advice. One is experience as many different things as possible, right? Especially as you lead larger pieces of the organization, if you don't understand how marketing works or how finance works, and you can't talk about EBITDA or NRR, GRR, ARR, all those things, if you don't understand those as a leader, you have a harder time being successful and driving business outcome, right? So one of the things I've always required of my dev managers is that they could be product managers. Because if you don't understand how the product works, how it's consumed, you're creating software blindly and don't really have the ability to make the perfect decision in the right moment. So I really think that people should experience as much as possible. There's a school of thought that says a broad but shallow experience set makes you more successful than a narrow but deep one. And I think in many disciplines that's true. I don't want my doctor to have a broad, narrow, skill set, but in most disciplines, knowing a little about a lot of things can be very helpful. The other one is I say, leave your ego behind. Feel free to be wrong. Feel free to not know the answer. Feel free to take on something that's really uncomfortable, that might be new to you, maybe a big challenge, and just experience, be present in the moment, experience what it's like to take a risk. And that will make you successful because that gives you a power not everyone has when you're comfortable enough in your own skin to just explore something with a level of naivete and recognize that and say, okay, I don't know a lot about this, but I can figure it out and I can go ask people and I can try and be wrong and I can try again.
Yeah, I like it. It reminds me of the book Ego is the Enemy. I can't remember the author's name right now, but great book for people that haven't read it. And we do need to check our egos because I think they're useful. They're a great tool, but they creates a lot of problems in the space if it gets a little bit too, the volume of that is too high. So I think that's a great tip there, Ed. And so as part of your journey, I imagine you've read, in fact, I know you've confessed this to me already, you've read a few books. Yes. Is there any books that you think people should really kind of add to their reading list?
So yes, one of my favorite books is called The Comfort Crisis. It's by a guy named Michael Easter. And the basic premises of the book is we've become too comfortable. And when you become super comfortable, your ability to accomplish hard things diminishes. And so in the book, he proposes that we consciously put ourselves in uncomfortable positions, right? And I think that's really true because one of the examples you use, if you buy a luxury car and it's super cushy, that suddenly becomes your baseline for comfort. And then you go up and up and up. And you get to the point where you're just really locked into a single way of doing things, a single way of thinking. And so I'm a big fan of pushing people out of their comfort zone because it really does drive you to think in a new and different way. And when you're outside that comfort zone, it's like you said before, if I have to make a leadership decision and I've never trained up on how to make hard decisions, I've never been out of my comfort zone, I don't know how to do it. And so when a crisis hits or a difficult problem hits, if you've only lived inside your comfort zone, you don't have the tool set to deal with that. So I'm a real big fan of pushing yourself to a point where you're uncomfortable, regardless of what that might be.
Yeah, I think that's a really good take on that. I think humans thrive in outside of it. I think we're designed to be out of our comfort zone. That's where we really come to life.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's true across all disciplines. I love to work out. I was a CrossFitter when CrossFitter was at its peak. Pushing yourself to that extreme was really interesting because it taught you things about your personality and your ability to persevere.
Yeah, it's funny what does emerge when you're in your discomfort. The thinking and the way you show up is actually quite fascinating. I did a run this morning. It's very cold here in the UK this morning, and I really didn't want to do it. And the conversation in my head was quite. I wish I'd have recorded it. It would have been a good share. And any other books?
Another thing that it's not related to business, but as I go through my career. Longevity is something that really is meaningful to me. And how do you live not just a long time, but you live a very healthy life for a long time so that you can continue to work, do your hobbies, have a really productive life that's rich and full. So one I've read recently is by Peter Attia. It's called Outlive. He's a doctor. He's a medical doctor. His focus is really how to live as long as possible, as healthily as possible. And one of the things he proposes is, what do you want to be able to do if you're 100 years old? Make a list and then work backwards in time to where you are now, what has to be true in order to accomplish that. So one example, I love to travel. I want to be able to travel when I'm 90. That means I have to be capable of lifting my suitcase up and putting it into the bin on the airplane. And so what does that mean? Where do I have to be today so that as the slow degradation of time that comes with age occurs, I can still do that at 90? Well, that principle works really well outside of just living longer. It works well in business. I want to be at this point in time, or in this place at this point in time. What does have to be true now to get me there? And so that pre-thinking, that pre-planning is essential in every facet of life.
Yeah. Great. That's a really good one, actually. I love the idea of looking for the out. Start with the goal in. Was it Stephen Covey said something very similar? Start with the end in mind, and then work backwards. So yeah, that's another takeaway from me. I'm going to have a list of these from you, Ed. And this is a fun part of the podcast. I'm going to offer you a wish. I'm going to be the tech genie for a second. What would you wish for your leadership, for your organization, or just in general, from a tech perspective?
Wow, that's a great question. So one of the things, Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Benioff from Salesforce, who recently both mentioned that they're not going to need to hire more developers because AI can do it all, right? One of the things I would love is that people apply greater reasonability to the AI potential and what it can really accomplish in the near term. Sometime in the future, there won't be developers. You'll be able to talk to a computer and it'll develop sophisticated software for you. But as you navigate business, and I work with the board of directors, or we think about what's feasible, having a tempered and realistic understanding of what AI can deliver today and what that means to your business and what it means to your end user and what it means to your employee base is something I would really love to be able to explore more deeply. And if I could see into the future 10 years and see what AI can really do, that would be fascinating. If I could time travel and see how is software developed 15 years from now, I think that would just be amazing.
I'd love to join you on that journey. We'll see if we can try and make that dream come true, that wish come true for you, Ed.
That sounds great.
Excellent. So as we come to the full stop of our time together, unfortunately, what's your kind of key takeaway that you'd like to offer as a gift to our audience as we part company?
Well, we've covered a lot of topics, but I think the thing that would be, if I was to give one piece of advice or one recommendation to someone, feel free to fail. Be open to the opportunity that you don't know everything or that you're going to try something and it's not going to work out. That's where most learning comes from. People grow the most when there's pain involved, I think, right? When everything's happy and easy and comfortable, you don't grow at the same pace you do when things are a little bit more austere and hard. So feel free to take a risk. It'll pay benefits.
Fantastic. What a great note to finish on. Totally with you on that one. So thank you for your time, Ed. It's been wonderful having you on CTO Confessions.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been great being here.
Thank you.